I am your host, Christene Marie. These are live daily conversations for folks who are in the trades, folks who are either owners, operators, or frankly, individuals who are really looking to strengthen their business, who are looking to strengthen the way that they show up for their family, if it's a family owned business, if they're looking for a way to strengthen the way that they're showing up for their team, and also remembering our why. So often we say that our families are the ones that we're doing all of this for, and we actually aren't actually showing up for them in a healthy way. So by the time we show up at home after a full days of work, man, we have hardly anything left to give. And so today we're talking about the importance of honoring the integrity of interpersonal relationships, which is really the first step in cultivating the relationship dynamic that is necessary for succession planning. And I'm speaking of it from a very personal standpoint. I am the fourth generation of a family-owned painting and finishing business. And my brother and I joined my dad as partners in 2021. And so it has been a lesson of trial and error getting involved and partnering with my dad over the last few years. And there's been so much good that has come from that. There's been a lot of lessons that have come as well. And so we're going to be diving into some of those tonight. Before I continue, Elijah, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me here. I'm so glad you came. I was hoping you'd come over. Y'all, last night we talked about we talked about a couple different things that I want to give a quick recap on. First, we were talking about just how, in general, should a family-owned business begin the process of succeeding the business into the next generation. And as we are looking ahead to deepen the conversation from yesterday, I just want to touch on the 3 points. One, there's 3 different entities we need to consider when we're looking at transitioning a business from generations. If it's a painting company, foundation repair business, or any type of trades, much less industry business, each one of these 3 entities needs to be considered when it is family owned. The individuals involved, the family involved, and the business involved. And then for each one of those 3 entities, the individuals, the family, and the business, what we need to examine for each one of these entities is the past. What is the foundation it was built on? The interpersonal relationships, the family dynamic, and the business. What's the foundation? What's the past? How does that show up in the present today? And then what is the future? What is our ideal? What's our vision for the individual relationships, the family, and the business? And the reason why each one of these 3 entities needs to be examined in the past, present, and future dynamic is because I've talked with so many business owners, so many family businesses that have either the business has been succeeded and passed on or sold, and then the interpersonal relationships haven't been kept intact, or the business died out, but at least the family stayed strong. And so how do we do this in a way that we don't all suffer for the sake of the growth of the business, or suffer as these interpersonal relationships just don't have the foundation necessary to go into business together? And so I just wanted to say thank you, Elijah, Brian, Dub Style. So glad to see you guys. Y'all, this conversation tonight, we're diving deeper into interpersonal relationships. This really is the very first hallmark of any family business that we're coming into question of analyzing. And again, it's when we're talking business concepts here, Foundation First is a digital marketing business for trade service companies that are family owned, but these principles really have to do with so many other areas of our life. The interpersonal relationships and the dynamics that go into having ones that are strong and consistent, predictable, and that are built on a good foundation go cross the spectrum from the boardroom to the bedroom. It really is so consistent over the span of time and over the span of our day even. And so when it comes to these interpersonal relationships, there's a couple of questions that I really want us to consider tonight as we're looking at, yes, a family business, and yes, the goal to succeed and pass it down. But I want us to first look in the mirror. when we're engaging in these interpersonal relationships and they're getting challenging, it's like sometimes it is like iron going up against iron, and it's so incredibly hard. Number one is looking in the mirror. When is the last time that you and I have done a full audit of ourselves in relationship to that person? Yes, but also just in relationship to ourselves. There's a couple of questions that I was mulling over tonight, just thinking about this conversation of doing a self audit because it's so easy. There's this biblical concept around take the log out of our own eye before we can see clearly to remove this speck out of someone else's eye. So if I haven't done the work to first look in the mirror and analyze myself when I engage in any scenario, again, boardroom to the bedroom, it is going to be nearly impossible for me to then be able to engage with the person that I'm having a struggle with in a way that is coming from a place of humility, that's being open to see really what am I missing here? What am I not understanding? And then being able to engage with them to find the goal is resolution. The goal is a solution to move forward into the next phase of the business, the next phase of our family, the next phase of our relationship, and ideally the next phase of our own selves, our growth. We are growing and being better together rather than you and I operating at odds. My brother-in-law, he used to say, why are we fighting? We're on the same team. And so that team mindset, an employer I had before I went off and started my own business a couple years ago, he said he only hires athletes because they understand, not professional athletes, literally they played a sport in middle high school. They understand the team mentality. And that is drastically different than someone who has only ever played on a solo team where they only know how to make themselves win, make themselves shine, make themselves look good. So, this team player mindset forces radical responsibility of oneself first and foremost to then be able to go in the interpersonal dynamic and say, all right, what am I missing? The one of the core tenets of interpersonal relationships and what deems it healthy or not is the inclusion. For those of you listening, know this so well, emotional intelligence. And there's two parts to emotional intelligence. The first is the ability to be aware of, to understand and then convey one's own emotions, and then the ability to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and with empathy. So with wisdom and with a sense of care. It's nearly impossible for us to go into that interpersonal relationship, the latter half of that experience, with wisdom and with empathy if we have not first done our part to examine ourselves. And so when it comes to these interpersonal relationships, in my family dynamic, in terms of my brother, myself, my dad, all three of us working in concert together, they had a very different relationship than my dad and I did, than my brother and I did. So when we think about the interpersonal relationships of the inner workings of whoever the core nucleus is of the business, there's multiple different experiences that each one of us is having because of our past relationship with that person. My brother and I have a very different relationship than my dad and I do based on the past. So we have to, yes, look in the mirror first, and then second, look at the past. What does the past have to say about the present? And I even had to have a couple of hard conversations with my brother and my dad, respectively. And they've had to have hard ones with me, where we have to learn to speak the truth with love. That's where the empathy piece comes in. But wisdom beckons us and urges us to actually convey the truth. And when we've done the work first to look in the mirror, that's the first half of emotional intelligence. We then can step into sharing, hey, this is where I need to see growth on your end. This is where I'm committed to growth on my end, for the purpose of us being able to move together in unity on the same team for the good of, yes, the business, the family, you and me, and also myself. So those are almost like the four commitments by way of incorporating emotional intelligence as the foundation of this relationship. Man, all of a sudden, I'm going to be better. We're going to be better. The family's better and the business is better as a result of this strengthening of interpersonal relationships and having emotional intelligence be the nucleus. Um, I love this. Dub Style says, especially generational integrity and vision for the whole company and family. It's so true. You're always, you say earlier, you're always maintaining your core ethos. So effectively, what is that? What is the core ethos of your life? What are you committing to? And Brian says boundaries. So this whole question around interpersonal relationships, I'm glad you brought that up, Brian, around boundaries, because we're talking about first looking in the mirror, with the first part of emotional intelligence, being aware of, understanding and conveying one's emotions, and then being able to engage interpersonally with wisdom and with empathy, communicating and conveying. And now we're actually having a conversation around what's going on. And then, Brian, you saying boundaries. It's kind of like, okay, now what are we going to do? How are you going to protect yourself? How am I going to protect myself? How are we going to protect the family and the business? And, there are times where one or both of one or both of us, my brother and I both, have taken times where we've stepped back and moved more into being involved in the family business, with my dad really being the key player, to protect our relationship, to protect the family. And actually, it might have even been in the best interest of the business to be more involved at various times, but I valued the interpersonal relationship and the family relationship more than the success of the business at the time. So with all three of these entities, the people involved, the family, and the business, what's the hierarchical prioritization? And we have to know that at the outset, because at the end of the day, all three, my dad, my brother, and I, making tons of money actually isn't the goal. Whereas another family business that I was talking to just 2 days ago, they sold and 10x'd what they were expecting. And the gentleman hasn't spoken to his dad in 4 years. So for me, that actually would have been a huge loss. Even though, yes, we got an extra couple million in the bank, great. And I lost my dad. I never wanted to do that. So my relationship with my father is of utmost priority. The peace and unity of the family is second, and then the success of the business is third and last in the order. Um, just kind of looking here at some of the chats. Elijah says, I never want to mix business and family. It's hard enough renting a room from my uncle. It's so, honestly, it's so true. It's so true. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Elijah, because it is, frankly, it's very brave and daring. And I will say, I think for those who are currently in this position, who are having a family business, those who are in this position and are willing to put in the reps, man, it is a high call, and therefore it is paramount that you and I are doing the work to first and foremost take chief radical responsibility over ourselves, because there is no way that we can engage in a healthy interpersonal relationship, family dynamic, and business dynamic if we're not well first. So to your point, Elijah, there's so much more at stake than ever if we're in business with family. So therefore, we have to be good. We have to be well. We have to be looking in the mirror on a daily basis, taking stock and taking an audit of our lives. And ideally, having other people hold us accountable. Probably not the people in the business that we're doing close life with and business with, but man, who are the people mentoring you, holding you accountable, holding up the mirror for you and saying, hey, do you know that you're doing this? And y'all, that's really the next step of leadership. Leadership is relational at the end of the day, every time. Dub Styles, unapologetically and blunt truth, as well as an understanding of the situation. I love that. It really is the both and, like, I'm going to speak the truth. There's again, another biblical concept. Clearly I've been trained from a particular place. Grace and truth. They're talking about Christ, which is ideally who we're embodying every single day. We're embodying God on earth. And whether you believe, the story of Jesus literally or allegorically, the concept of speaking the truth with grace, or Jesus speaking with truth and with grace. It was never one or the other. The truth wasn't a sledgehammer banging people over and annihilating them. And also there wasn't so much dripping, words dripping with grace, that the truth was never conveyed. And frankly, that's where understanding the past dynamics and past foundation upon which we're standing in this kind of lateral relationship. What is the past? What are we standing on? And okay, how do I actually need to be careful now given what the past was? So for example, the past for my relationship with my brother, well, I actually didn't speak the truth very much growing up. I actually had more of the grace and not enough of the truth. So now it's like, okay, I need to intentionally bring the truth in while not sacrificing grace. Um, yeah, emotional health is key. Radical candor. Oh, I love that, Brian. Y'all, you just made my night by joining on with me tonight. Thank you so much for joining this show. I'm going to be doing this every day for 61 days. I'm going to be going live every day for our Cross Foundation First, and we're talking much more about business, much more about family-owned businesses. But frankly, these principles again touch every area of our life. So grateful you all joined me tonight. I will see you tomorrow morning on the Knowing Show. So with that, have a good night, y'all, and I will